Hello everyone, it's Mary Maguire here, and it's day 4 of my 5 daily streams, which is looking at the issues facing women and gender equality in the workplace. So this is in celebration of International Women's Day 2025, where we're looking at various issues that are affecting women. Every year, International Women's Day has a particular theme that they look at, and one that we will be looking at this year is how to accelerate action. What is it that can be done to help us to understand the issues facing barriers to equality and what can be done about that. So you're probably aware of who I am. I'm Mary Maguire, founder of Agents to Change, which has been helping to build inclusive organisations since 2008. I'm the author of the Edge series, which includes the Inclusion Edge, helping leaders to be more inclusive in the workplace, and the Female Edge, which is helping women find success in the workplace. Over the last 3 days, the previous 3 days, I've covered a number of areas in terms of what are the issues that we see that are being faced by women in the workplace, what organisations can do about that in terms of creating safe, supportive spaces, and also how we can remove some of the barriers that we know exist to full participation, to full access to opportunity. Today, what we're here to talk about is data. So why is data important, and how can we use it to actually take meaningful action which starts to move the needle in terms of equality and representation? So let me start by saying, well, why is data important? And many of you will be in organisations where there is a plethora of data available to you. So it'll be in reports and decision support frameworks and packs giving you data that's available for sales and marketing and many other things. So data is the lifeblood of organisations. Data is there to help us to set priorities. It allows us to go a bit deeper with our questions. So rather than just responding to the immediate issues that we're facing, it allows us to just go a bit deeper and help us to understand what's going on. And it also helps us to maybe analyse issues from different perspectives as we get a deeper understanding or a clearer picture of what might be going on. Now, what I see organisations do very often, and less so now, but still, it still happens, is they rush to make decisions around representation, around targets, around what the areas are that they need to focus on and address in terms of either inclusion, diversity, or representation, without fully understanding the data picture of why things might be happening. But it's really important to understand that data picture, because if we don't, we're likely to go after the wrong issues. And I know targets are becoming unpopular, certainly in the US with the new administration there, which is saying that targets are inherently discriminatory. I would say that, because we know discrimination and structural and organisational barriers exist for full participation for many parts of the organisation. They are far from discriminatory, and they are essential for us to really address where there are power imbalances in society. But let's leave that on the side. We're not going to get into a big debate about the whys and wherefores of target setting, but it is important to understand how data serves us in really understanding maybe where we should focus our time. And if we understand that, then we can actually understand where we can make a difference. So maybe the first question to maybe consider, and this is whether you're an individual contributor in an organisation, whether you're a manager that's managing a team, whether that's small or large, or whether you're a leader who's managing teams across different disciplines in the organisation, or indeed across different geographic areas, is what data is available to you. And whether you're even aware of whether that data is available, and whether you're pulling that data on a regular basis. So most organisations of any significant size have a range of places you can get that. One of them often is the HR information system, HRIS, where there is data available which you can pull as a manager and a line manager, or there's available information through your HR BP, HR business partner. But wherever it is, it's understanding what reports, what information is available for you, and being able to get that information and have a look at it. One of the places we can do that is through some of the visualizations that are available. So, almost all organizations now, there may be some exceptions, do have dashboards which actually talk about the overall makeup of the organization. So, let me share an example here. This is an anonymized example. But in this example, what we see is things that are quite important for this. This happens to be a engineering organisation. So what they have done is they've looked at the general population for the area that they serve. This happens to be a UK example, and then what is the population makeup that we have. So it's a great visualisation to say, are we being representative, sorry, of the population that is around us. Now, we might not get it exactly to the same profile, but where we have big mismatches, so if we happen to be an area where there's a larger population of minority, ethnic, Black and Asian people, which there would be in here, often shortened to BAME. I know that there's different acronyms in the US for this, and we seem to have a population in our employee base which is overwhelmingly white. We'd have to question why that is. That's not exactly what we're seeing here. The other thing we're seeing is the gender split here. Gender split in an organisation overall is helpful to understand. This happens to be a male dominated industry, so not surprisingly, there's a very strong male population shown here. But what they're looking at is where can we go to actually make a difference in terms of increasing our female population. So one that is working in this way where there is a traditionally male dominated, they're not going to set targets or set priorities which say that we should be 50-50 within the next 2 or 3 years. That's just not going to be realistic. But it does allow them to understand how big is the gap and where should we set our expectations around it. And the other thing that's helpful with this, that's not shown in this visualization, but is really helpful when we do it in other ways, when we cut the data and we do visualizations, is we say, what are the correlations? So if I do a split by gender for the overall population, what does that split look like if I do it across all of the levels in the organization? What does that split look like if I do it by gender and age? So do we see a difference in the age profile and the gender profile according to levels in the organisation as well? And we can also then look at that correlation in relation to other things. So if you're a global organisation, we can obviously take the regional view. What is it if it's North America versus Europe? What does that profile look like if we're looking at it across things like the disciplines, the different structures and departments in the organisation, and do they change based on whether it's more of an office-based or head office role as opposed to something that is based in the core business, maybe it's a manufacturing. So you can see that using them correlations helps us to understand. The other thing we can understand by using correlations is things like how well are we as an organisation holding on to people if we bring people who are from underrepresented groups into our organisation. So doing splits based on tenure helps us to understand whether people who are new into the organisation but come from an underrepresented group are staying 12 months, 24 months, 3 years or longer. And if we can see high turnover of particular subgroups, whether that is because they're from a minority ethnic group, or whether they're from whether they're a woman, or whether they have a disability, we can start to then maybe question that a bit more. Just take that slide off. But the visualization is helpful. The real question is what happens next. So Once we see the gaps in that data, the question is, what do we do about it? Does it matter? And what can we do about it? So that's where it's really important to not rush to action and say, we have to solve this, we have to close this gap. So, for example, the one I've just showed you where there's a very high percentage of male to female, if that's been the typical picture of that industry for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, it happened to be in that industry, it was well over 100 years. That's not something that gets solved overnight. That takes a long time to start to change the dynamic of that and how that looks like. So you need to think about what is it we need to consider. And that's where, when you look at the gaps, thinking about it in terms of hypotheses that might be going on. So a hypothesis for that, which was more of an engineering one, is, are we using very traditional and male masculine language to go out to the market and look for potential new talent? And is that by virtue of some implicit bias putting off female candidates who are qualified and capable of doing the job from applying and coming to us? Other hypotheses may be something to do with things like your employer brand. Do we have an employer brand which actually speaks to a wider audience out there of people in the population, whether that's via gender or whether it's via race or ethnic profile? Are we using, again, language, identity, images which suggest that there's only a narrow bandwidth of employees that we're really interested in and we want to attract? And then also things like our employer brand in relation to online reviews, like things like Glassdoor. Are we finding that because there's a higher turnover of people from less represented groups, are we finding that we're getting a negative reaction from people that is in our online profile? So the hypotheses around the gaps in the data is really important to then think about. So what do we do about that? How do we, test it out? And then when we've tested it out, then what do we want to do about it? So you can see what I'm saying is, moving to action to solve a problem before we've really understood it rarely brings results. If we're wanting to build more diversity and we're clear about the business case for that, because A, it's easier to attract people into the organisation, B, it's easier to keep them in the organisation, and C, it leads to better performance and innovation, we have to understand what the underlying issues are of why we're not getting to that point now. Once we've understand that, we then are in a place where we can take action. And once we've tested out the hypotheses and we've got the data around that, there's a number of levers in an organisation that you can pull to help you to accelerate the action for gender equality, which is what I'm talking about today, but also across all the diversity traits that may be out there in your general population. So I already talked in an earlier live stream this week about recruitment and how we go out to the market and actually look for applicants. So that's a really important one. If we know there's a hypothesis about we have what we call gendered language, so it's very masculine or even very feminine, and it's implying things or putting things into the job requirements which may automatically discount people who may be suitable but can't fully meet them requirements, whether that's travel or hours of work or location of work, but we could actually lift them to make it more accessible to them, then that needs to be looked at. So inclusive recruitment is a big part of this process. But you can also look at some of the processes, whether the processes are in recruitment or inside your organisation when people are in the organisation, in terms of how they're managed, how they're supported, how they're developed, how they can see their career unfolding over many years with your organisation. Then processes are important to be thinking about in terms of inclusivity as well. And then the other things that you've got are policies. Now, policies and processes I'm going to go into in a little bit more detail tomorrow, but policies have a huge impact on people. So thinking about, are the policies that still serve us and our employee population, or do they need updating and maybe opening up other opportunities is also an important one. And thinking about the ways that you're helping to raise awareness across your overall employee group. So an awful lot of organisations do, or widespread bias awareness, unconscious bias, various different ways we talk about that, but ways that we make people aware of the bias they might be using in their everyday language, in the banter that's accepted at work, in the way that conversations are happening, closed conversations and open conversations that may be ringing a, a poor note or a dull note for some of your employees. So how you can actually help with that. So they're all things that can help. But as I said, it starts with data. So thinking about the data that is available to you, the data that you can pull down in reports, the data you can get hold of, and then using that to critically analyse what might be going on and where you maybe need to set some priorities and how to take action. So that's it for this session. Tomorrow, I'll be coming back and talking about the policies and the processes and the procedures in your organisation that maybe can be addressed to actually help improve women in the workplace's outcomes. So that's it for today. I hope you found it useful. If you've got any thoughts or you want to share some of your own experience in this, I'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow and I'll be looking forward to speaking to you then. Wishing you a great day.